Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Thursday. Happy New Year to all of you. Um, this is the Erudition Network, and I am Eddie Phillips, and this is Thursday, and this is the interactive Black History and Knowledge session that we do on every Thursday. And we are in a new year providing you with historical knowledge and understanding and helping you to grow your knowledge base. If you are new to the program, I welcome you and I thank you for joining me tonight as we go over some really good topics, hopefully, and delve into our history. Um, I hope that you had a great holiday season with you and yours and your family. Um, this new year, I have dedicated myself to the idea that this is a knowledge and teaching year. We will spend this year um, growing our knowledge and understanding on all types of different things and aspects and um, grow our families. That is my um, uh, 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 goal and something that I want everyone to uh, take on and do themselves so that we can grow and become um, more wise and intelligent on how things work in this world. Um, this knowledge is available everywhere right now. You have the ability to pull things up um, that you have never been able to do before in all the history of the world, and to be able to do that um, is a blessing, is a godsend, um, and something that we definitely um, want to encourage that we all do. All right. I don't know how many of you uh, have been joining us. Okay, I see my wife is here. Thank you for being here. Um, Live. I know we've been getting um, our dedicated audience, and I'm so appreciative to all of you who join us weekly on the programs for Erudition um, and help us to get this information that we provide out here. It is greatly appreciated. But many of you watch later on, and that is appreciated also. Please feel free when you do watch, though, to leave a comment, even if it's on YouTube, if it's on Facebook, um, Twitter, or whatever, or X as they call it now. Every place that we stream, leave comments on the shows so that we can get better, or we can handle topics that are of interest to you. Uh, Tonight, I'm gonna stay on task to what we have been speaking on over the last few weeks. Over the last few weeks, we have spent time talking about the Latin and African connection um, in the world, in our Americas, and how, as we look at the society right now, we are finding ourselves to be a lot less appreciative, accepting um, of our Latin brothers and sisters, forgetting that they have a connection with us that predates the history of the Americas, the American, as we call it now, in this country. Um, we have a distinct background. When you look at Latin America, indigenous people, and blacks, right? There have always been laws in the earlier parts of this nation, this union, that were anti Mexican, anti Indian, anti Black, and undermined the rights of people. Right? We can look back to California and the gold rush and how the 49ers and people rolled in there and stole land. And in order to do that, they changed the Spanish Mexican, as they saw it, to something they racialized them to make them something else. They created laws that defined the Latin people as inferior, and it allowed them to have minimal claims on their land and their position as American citizens. Now, this is important for us to understand because after the Mexican War, the Treaty of Guadalupe, right, was supposed to make sure that people were treated fairly. However, that was not the case. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed in order to end the war with Mexico and allow 115,000 to 120,000 Mexicans who lived in the newly acquired land to be citizens. And so when we look at the history of that and we realize that people made folks to be something different. And what was their purpose? The purpose was in order to keep a hold of slavery. That's one of the primary. Mexico ceded about 60% of their territory from in signing that treaty. And if you don't really realize how big that territory was, it included where I'm sitting right now, Colorado, parts of Oklahoma, the state of Kansas, and Wyoming. Not to mention Texas, obviously. And so the treaty helped create more parts of what we see now as America. And today, we're still arguing over the migrant and telling them that they get off of our land, go back home, and ignoring what was taken. So I want us to spend time looking at this because over the next few weeks, because I think it is so important that we remember our connection. Because if we don't, then we find ourselves falling back into the trap of racial, of bigotry, of ignorance. The war between the United States and Mexico was in 1848, was when they signed the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And if you consider that that wasn't that long ago, that wasn't that long ago. And yet, here we are, still arguing with each other, fighting with each other over land that people that was stolen and taken back, stolen and taken back. I don't know why we can't see um, the foolery, but we spend so much time hollering about the Alamo, the Alamo, the Alamo, the Alamo. And we see it as a resistance, a American symbol, and we ignore the fact, as I've said, I think over the last two sessions, that the whole issue was slavery. The Americans who were sent there, or who were there, I won't say sent there, they stayed there. That is the fact, and they wanted to stay there when the Mexican government had already said that they they would not support slavery. And so here we are screaming about the Alamo. Yeah, I find it crazy when I see people of color do it, uh, without any knowledge of what it really means. I'm sorry, Eric. I thought I did say hi to you. My screen was freezing a little bit. I couldn't see you, my face or anything for a while. But this is where we are in this nation, in its world, and people still fighting over things that they don't really own or possess. Why? I also wanted to bring up the fact that it was not lost on the Mexican people the struggles and the issues that were faced um, by blacks, by enslaved people um, during the um, periods of even the Civil War and Reconstruction. There were major issues in Philadelphia, which is one of the places that is significant in the founding of this country. There were a lot of free colored people in Philadelphia, but yet, as much as they were supposedly free before, during, and after the Civil War, they were taxed differently. They were treated differently in public. They were barred from accessing certain areas and doing certain things and having certain services up until the constitutional amendments were passed. They could not send their kids to schools because those schools would then be integrated and mixed, and that was not going to be possible. And they weren't allowed to have as many schools in function. They couldn't ride in city horse cars, but yet they were taxed. Yet they were taxed. They paid a higher tax actually than most people and got less. Why is that important? Because in order for that to happen, people on all sides of the political and financial spectrum had to agree. They had to come to some agreement um, on how this would be done. And so there was this false security that still plays in today that tells us that the racial idea, right, allows people to have this false equivalation of what they consider to be superior. So you have people who are wealthy who benefit from those who are not wealthy for working and being enslaved and working for them. And then you have people who are not wealthy, but yet are white or put into a situation of superior situation, who feel that it's okay that I don't have enough because I have more than, or they perceive themselves to have more than this black person. This was the beginning of privilege, the understanding of privilege, a privileged class, privileged people. Didn't matter what you had. I could do certain things. I can ride in horse cars. I can send my kids to school. We can go to a restaurant. We can go to a park, but they cannot. And even though they had equal to or less than the very people who they looked down upon, they participated and helped to perpetuate the system. Why is that important? Because in order for what we see today, people have to agree that these migrants, these people from South America, should not be here. And they may struggle. You may be struggling in the same way that they are, but yet you look down upon them because you've created this false unity, this false belief based on ignorance and things that were not taught to you. We have governors who are sending people from the South to the North. They are paying for planes and buses and sending these people out of the area. They think that it's important to spend that money, the money that they spend out of the state's coffers, to do that, as opposed to using that money to help those people relocate or help those people have a better life. And I find it funny in Texas where they got the Alamo on hats and shirts, right? Where they got the Alamo on hats and shirts and they scream out about how important the Alamo is, they would treat people like this. It shows me that they're not being taught. They're not being taught about really what it is. And I'm going to be honest with you, many of you have never been taught about really what it is. They call these people Texas rebels. That's what they were called. And goes along with this rebellion mindset in America, but not assigning what the rebellion was actually about. It was when you look at the Alamo, it was an issue of immigration from the United States to Mexico. It was an issue of violating the law. Mexico said, you can't be here with slaves. And the rebels, the defenders of the Alamo, you've heard about them, Davy Crockett, James Bowie, right? How they held out for days against a massive Mexican army. And they scream, remember the Alamo. But this was all Americans going into Texas. Find the irony here, taking land from Mexico and refusing to leave as they were violating the law. Mexico didn't abscond the uh the Texas rebels and send them further down into South America, drop them off in Brazil or somewhere. They didn't do any of that. But we do, because we don't understand our history. We don't read our history to understand it. We have folks sitting in the cities right now angry because they feel that they're taking their jobs, their places, they're overpacking us, they're doing this, and that. And we ignore the people. I think I told you this last week. We ignore that it was Americans in the South America, who accepted blacks on the southern edge of the Underground Railroad. We don't get taught about the Latin and the indigenous intervention to try to help the black enslaved in this country. We're only taught about how they went to the north and how white people held them and hid them, and blacks and people hid them, and they got them to places like Maryland and all the way up to Canada. And very little history is shared talking about how they were able to go south, how they were able to go into Mexico, how they were able to go even further into South America and make a life. Whereas the people who were in the north, as I just told you, in places like Philadelphia, in places like Baltimore, in places they suffered. And when the Fugitive Slave Act was inflicted, people came to get them. People absconded and stole blacks and pulled them into slavery who had never been slaves. But many of you have never been taught about the southern edge of the Underground Railroad. Why do you think that is? Why do you think you don't know that African Americans fled from places like Florida and they escaped into the Republic of Mexico, to the island of Cuba, to the Dominican Republic as we know it now? That they went across those waters in order to survive. You know why you don't hear it? Because of the anti-slavery spirit that was there from Mexican leaders, as I talked about Jose Morales last week. And when the Mexicans waged their war for independence, when the Haitians waged their war for independence, the idea of slavery was evil. And they believed that slavery was an evil to the world. They believed that slavery had destroyed kingdoms and empires. And it could not be expected to do anything but to divide a nation. So it should be outlawed. But yet, we're not taught this in our schools. we're only taught about the abolition of the British, the abolition of the American, the abolition. We're not taught that people saw us as brethren, as family, as parts of them. In 1852, the American government was angry. Angry. They wanted to stop the Underground Railroad and the escaping of slaves. Congressmen stood in Congress and filibustered about why we should go to war with Mexico, why we should shut them down. People went into places and seized control to try to shut it down. Killed Mexicans, blacks, indigenous people, waged war on the idea of separating these cultures. Because they understood that bringing them together would create a power. And we're still seeing it today. We're still seeing it today. They called it Mexican border troubles. Sounds familiar? We're having Mexican border troubles. It wasn't people coming in, it was people leaving out. That was the trouble back then. They were mad because they said the Tejanos rescued runaway slaves, hid them, fed them, helped them to grow in their intelligence, taught them to read, taught them other languages. Manifest Destiny said we needed to take over the entire Americas to prevent this. They don't tell you that the Black Seminoles of Florida, after the Seminole Wars, that they left and they went down to Mexico, and Mexico used them to protect their borders. That is a historical fact. They fought against Texas Rangers and people who came down to try to abscond and grab slaves back. Slave catchers and law enforcement couldn't get into Mexico. So what was the only thing to do? Wage war. Wage war. But that's not taught. And I get tired sometimes because so much isn't taught to us. So much isn't shared with us that when we go over this history, and I'm going to tell you all, this is significant history. People don't know because they don't listen. People don't know because they're not taught. People don't know because they don't want to know. It's easy to see that mother coming across those rivers down in Texas or in the border states and say, oh, she's crazy, she's foolish, and forget our own ancestors who had to do the same thing to get away from slave catchers at the cost of their lives and take their own children across those lands, across those waters, with the hope of finding some place to be free, only to later have a government to go down and corrupt those lands that they could not possess. And we'll get into that come next week. To go down and influence those lands because of the fear with the excuse of communism. One of our recent presidents called those countries S-hole countries, crap hole countries, not worth anything. Where did he get that from? What makes him think that those people have no value, that they're rapists and murderers and killers? I'll tell you where he gets it from. He got it from some of the founding fathers. The John Adams, the John Quincy Adams, the Thomas Jeffersons, James Madison, James Monroe, who felt that those people could not self-govern, who did not support their revolutions in South America because they did not see them as fruitful revolutions of intellectual value, because those people were fighting against white and European powers to self-govern themselves. What made it different than anything that was going on in the Americas? The only difference is color and culture. Color and culture. And even to this day, we're arguing and fighting the same ignorance. We're watching people barely make it across waters. People have drowned. A couple of years ago, we watched as Border Patrol people were going around pouring out water that groups had left out for families who were making their trek into the Americas. Why? Because it was illegal. So it was better to allow them to die. These are the same people who have flags with the Alamo, license plates with the Alamo, who have no idea what the Alamo was about, what the Mexican-American War was about, what the Seminole Wars were about. At the heart of it, it was about people wanting to be free. But the thing we celebrate is about people wanting to possess others. There's a difference there. Men were willing to die at the Alamo because they felt it was their God-given right to possess another individual. That's not freedom. And we will watch people come through our southern borders and die who are quite literally seeking freedom from governments we know are oppressive because we help to finance some of them. And mistakes happen and things happen. But every night you turn on your television and you hear that same statement: the border problem. The border problem. And we don't put two and two together because most of us don't know, don't care. I remember talking to a Pan Africanist a couple of years ago, and he was saying how uh, he used to be mad at Africans because he would say, you know, they never came over here for us. They never came to even look for us. And I always found that to be funny because I'm like, they were dealing with their own oppressions and issues. But here's the thing, we have a chance to reconcile our relationships with our brethren and sisters in South America, to better understand our history with them, to better understand our connection with them. But we side with ignorance. We side with a society that says they don't deserve to be here. We side with policy that was written by people who are motivated by older policies that were racist and xenophobic. When the Spanish, indigenous, and Latin created what is in Florida, what was known as Negro Fort. And all of those families, men, women, children, lived in this area in peace. It was the American government afraid of the idea that these people would form a force to free other slaves in the South that blew up Negro Fort. It was the same Secretary Adams. It was the same congressman who sat and said, no, let's go into this land and destroy these people who simply wanted to be free. But many of us, until we talked about it a couple of months ago, never knew what Negro Fort was. Never knew that that's what won Andrew Jackson, future then to become president, his fame. We didn't care to teach that. History is something that you need to invest in so that you can kind of see where we are today, to avoid the problems of yesterday. But I don't know if we are. I hear just as many African Americans as I do anyone else condemn the migrants. They don't belong here. As if it was something wrong with wanting to be free. I told you, most of the slaves that came over to the New World, slaves who were brought over to the New World, 90% went to South America. The separation of Africans from Africa is not just a United States of America problem. It was something that affected South America too. Huge, huge swaths of land down there can be traced to the same African ancestry that many of you can trace to yourselves. But we would say, get them out of here. They don't belong here. And unfortunately, too many of us, too many of us are just really quick to blow it off, to not see it. And I guarantee you, even after I make these statements tonight and after I go over these things tonight, we still won't see it. You know, the people of the of South America are amazing. They are as amazing to me as the African, because one of the things that historians look at is the idea, and maybe you have heard this, maybe you have not. Um, Maize. Do you know what maize is? You should. You use it every day, or most of us use it in some way every day. Of you who I have on here tonight, do you know what maize is? I'll give you a couple of seconds. This hasn't been as interactive. There's only about 3 of you on here, but do you know what maize is? I'll spell it for you. M-A-I-Z-E. I'll take it. No one knows. Maize is corn. Maize is a corn product. Maize is amazing because in order for it's not something that is naturally made. The indigenous people and the ancestors of our Latin brothers and sisters, as horticulturists, found a way to link plants to create it. Maize can feed you. Maize can um, keep you full. But they were even more smarter than that, because they also raised maize and beans. Thousands of years ago, they understood that maize was something that was important to their diet. And then they understood that they couldn't get all of the vitamins from it. So what did they do? They decided that they were going to grow other things to help them with the diet. This is before biologists and scientists understood um, these things about vitamins and everything else. They understood this. And when trade happened, people will argue that the Portuguese, that's a lie, introduced Africa to maize. I would venture to say that it happened well before that, because the spread of it is illogical if it did not happen before that. And Africans learned to grow corn and maize and beans in the same way that their South American brethren did. We are connected in so many ways, and it is upsetting. It is upsetting that we war against each other. We war against each other so much, and we don't have to. We don't have to. I'm gonna leave a little room for you guys tonight. If you're on here, you have any other question. I mean, I'm gonna stay on the topic if I need to. But I know there's a lot of things going on in the world. Maybe you have historical questions right now you'd like to ask. Um, and I'm going to open up that floor because I think where we are right now, we have maybe like 15 more minutes. So I'm going to open that up to you. And while you're doing that, if you're going to make a comment, question, or whatever, I would ask that you share this program. Help us as we move forward with the Erudition Network, and trying to reach as many people as we possibly can. Um, your help and support is greatly needed, and it definitely helps us to do the things that we do. On the bottom down here is our ticker. You are encouraged to please donate whatever to our Cash App, whatever you can. It is greatly appreciated. It helps us as we build courses, as we build things, and as we move this network forward. I would love to hold it all on myself to do it, but we need help. And everything you provide us, we give back to you in knowledge and buying the equipment that we have in order to stream to you every week and provide you the information and knowledge that we do on our multiple programs. So it is greatly appreciated. And I thank you for those of you who have already donated or sent anything to the program. Thank you. We appreciate it. Please feel free to do it as many times as you can. We will appreciate it even then. And you will see the fruition of what we're doing um, with those funds as they come in. Um, I was leaving that floor open for you all to ask any questions, but I see that we don't have any questions. Any history question that you have, please feel free to um, to join us on the Erudition Network on Thursdays with this session. You can bring your questions, or you can hit us on the Erudition Network .com. We have our own website, or you can go to Facebook and drop it in the Erudition homepage. You see the sign over here, right over here in the corner, right here. Either up at the top, the Erudition symbol with the head, the golden head. You see that, you know you're in the right place, and you will be able to drop a question for us, and we definitely will answer you and provide you sources and places to go to further your knowledge and your understanding. I before I get off of here tonight, I want to encourage you uh, to join the pages that I just mentioned. Go on Facebook. If you don't do anything else on Facebook, join the Erudition Network Facebook page. Join the Erudition Network group. Um, I guarantee you there will be something put in there that you will grow your understanding. Um, and I guarantee you, you will be blessed. You will be blessed. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Facebook user. Um, I really sometimes I have so much history up here, and I am always amazed at what we're not taught or what we haven't been taught. Even with this right here, I'm writing a paper right now for, well, I should say a paper. I'm writing a section for a book that I'm working on to talk about this right here. To talk about, if you talk to any historians, they will tell you that this is an Olmec head. If you talk to some people, they say, "Oh, you got an idol in your house." This is not an idol. This was actually sent by a good Navy friend of mine. Um, I greatly appreciate him sending me this. And we talked about these heads, right? Uh, that had been found, and how people tried to say that the heads were indications of the Olmec. The Olmec means the rubber people, but it's also a made up term. It was made up by a man named Matthew Sterling. Matthew Sterling, because he could not understand why Inca culture in South America uh, was the way that it was, that it had fostered out and made these amazing places. He decided that a culture known as the Olmecs had to just pop up. They had to just exist. Here's the funny part. Matthew Sterling, right, was wrong. But I almost say purposefully wrong. He created the idea of a different culture in the early 1900s, and he perpetuated it. As they dug up more heads down in South America and La Venta, down in the south parts of Mexico, they kept digging these heads up. And what they could never explain is the heads, this is just an example of one, but the actual heads weighed up to 2 to 5 tons. And the rock that was used had to be taken from the mountains. And because they say that the early Mesoamericans did not have carts, they didn't understand wheels. We can't validate that, but this is what they have said. They couldn't understand how, this is what they had said before the discovery of these heads. Well, how did they get these heads down there along the beaches? So when they went to Tres Zapotes and you see these heads, they had to create something. So Matthew Sterling suggested, let's create a different culture that your kids are taught about in school. Let's call them Olmecs. Let's call them the rubber people, because we know that we found evidence that they created rubber. Let's say that they predated the Inca, the Maya, and well, let's just say that they appeared and then they just disappeared. Let's ignore the fact that the heads that we dig up look African. Let's ignore the fact of the African other artifacts that we dig up in this area. And even though we can't find evidence or bones of these people, let's completely disregard the idea that Africans could have sailed over to South America, to the Americas, or to the lower parts of America and interacted with these people. It is amazing to me how we ignore our connections with our folks. We have to do better. I keep this on my desk, and I really appreciate my friend for sending this, because it reminds me of our connections. It tells me that we are more connected than we know. The validation of Black explorers coming over with the conquistadors and being accepted and allowed into villages that the Spanish could not get into because people had seen folks of color before and they had reverenced them. We are afflicted by so much pseudo history and false history. And to try to navigate through that history is so difficult. This is why we do the show every night, every Thursday night, to allow you all to ask these questions, to grow your knowledge, to share this information. And I understand sometimes you said that uh, you can't all you can as you usually do. I appreciate as whenever you can. We appreciate everything that you all do and supporting us and helping us. Um, I'm going into this new year. I'm gonna take this last 5 minutes. I'm going into this new year with a different mentality. I realize that there is so much to learn and so much to be taught, and it has to be taken seriously. It's not saying that I didn't take it seriously before, but I feel like I've committed myself again more so because I'm seeing how the effects of people not knowing what it's doing, how it's turning us against each other, how the crab in the barrel mentality is now back in full effect, how the stratified nature of America is still pressing down on those people of color, whilst others sit at the top, hiding with wealth or privilege. And let me tell you, those two things can be separate. As I said tonight, you could be wealthy and privileged and poor and privileged. It's all about a mentality. I don't have to respect you. I don't have to learn about your culture, your part of American culture. Why? Because it doesn't benefit me. You don't look like me. You don't sound like me. And that way, I don't have to validate your existence or your contribution to this world. And when I don't do that, I only see one view, a parallax view of history in the world. You ask yourself why people can be um, xenophobic or racist or bigoted. That's why, because they only see their side of it, what they have been taught about their value of it. My family came over, right, this way. My family came over on the Mayflower. Yes, I don't have a lot of money, but I have that history to lean on. I know I have value. Your family came over here on slave ships in 1619. And even though I don't have any evidence that that's in fact true, because there were blacks here before that, there are people of color here before that. I'm going to assume that that's true. And I'm going to start your history at that point. And I'm never going to allow you to escape that mentality that you are the children of slaves. And that's all you are. Knowledge of self is empowering, helpful. It grows you, it motivates you. I hope you got something from this episode tonight, as I always hope you do. Please feel free to drop me a line if you disagree with anything that was put out tonight, or you're just curious to learn more. Please drop a line to us in the chat or on our homepage, on Facebook, or in our group on Facebook, or on our website on the eruditionnetwork.com, and we will respond to you. You all have a great and blessed rest of your evening. I'm going to get out of here. I thank you for those of you who all came in later. I don't know who you are because you didn't let me know, but I thank you for your joining us, even for the last few minutes. And I hope that you share this program with someone. Again, remember, please feel free to help us with the Erudition Network by our Cash App, $ the Erudition Network. Everything that you give us or donate to us goes to help us with these programs. You all be blessed. God willing, we'll see you next week, and we will go further. Next week, we will start to talk about more modern times and the connections that we have with our Latin brothers and sisters as we continue this series that we're doing and talking about that. And then we will start moving into more things that are more directly related to Black history as we go through January into February, which is Black History Month. So I look forward to you all joining us. All right. Yeah, I see that you said I came in late, but I always enjoy what I hear. God continue blessing. Thank you. Thank you, Facebook user. I don't know why I'm seeing all these Facebook users. Must be something going on with the algorithm or with the program. But thank you for joining us. All right. I've said enough. My wife always tries to tell me that I talk too much, which I'm an introvert, which I never talk too much. I just try to teach as much as I can. All right, everybody. You have a good one, and we will see you again next week, God willing. Thank you.